Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today, I'm excited to introduce Apeksha Jain, an experienced wills and estate lawyer. In this episode, which continues our partnership with the Legacy Expo, Apeksha shows her personal journey into the legal field, emphasizing a human-centered approach to estate planning and litigation. We discuss everything from the importance of keeping wills updated to navigating complex estate disputes. Apeksha also sheds light on the probate process, explains how she simplifies legal complexities for her clients, and highlights the ethical considerations that come with estate litigation. Let's dive in. Apeksha, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Hi, Maria. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
To kick us off, can you share a little bit about your own personal journey and actually what inspired you to specialize in wills and estates law?
Absolutely. So it was a bit of a journey where I started off, did an undergrad in accounting, thinking I was going to practice tax for the rest of my life. And of course, it was very naive of me to think I would know everything before getting into the area of law. Um, and I just happened to stumble upon estates with no plan or any inclination towards it. And very quickly recognized that it was an interesting combination of both an aspect of tax, family dynamics, and also just dealing with the human element of people dealing with loss and legal issues at the same time. So it just happened to be a really great blend with the complexity of legal issues and the human element. And I happened to just continue to practice it. I did dabble into other areas of law, but gravitated towards estates and essentially have been practicing it for about 6+ years now. So the problem solving that most lawyers look forward to is something that was an interesting idea in estates, but combined the aspect of the human element of it. And here I am.
And can you speak to that human element for you? Like what drew you to that or what appeals to you when it comes to that?
So I experienced loss during my childhood, and growing up, it's not a conversation that you ordinarily have if you've been through that as a child. And so when I really grappled into this area of law is when I recognized and it connected immediately, where I could really empathize with that concept and still be able to provide them with a solution-based approach. And I think that's helped in a lot of ways because you really want to understand what emotions and family dynamics people are going through. But at the same time, you want to cater towards providing them with an answer.
Beautiful. As a fellow child who experienced loss and is part of the Dead Mom Club, I totally understand and relate to needing to answer why, how come, how do we, what is the meaning behind this? Let's figure it out. Yeah.
Exactly.
When it comes to the services that you offer, what would you say are the primary services? And how do you see them benefiting your clients?
Yeah, so I practice at a firm that is full service. So we offer legal services in all areas of law. I specifically practice in estates, which means I deal with estate planning, estate administration, elder law, and litigation. So from the process of people wanting to starting to think about their estate plan, how they would want their estate to be distributed, to dealing with the post administration of the estate, as well as litigation. That whole process involves several steps, and those areas of law are what I specialize in. And in terms of offering the services, whether it's dealing with estate related disputes, so litigation, all of that experience comes in handy when you're dealing with estate planning. So you realize what not to do. That can lead to estate litigation disputes. So it really helps inform one area of law into the other.
And you mentioned going back to the human element aspect of it. Do you have an approach that is human centered and very client-centered in order to ensure the delivery of the legal services, to make sure that they're efficient and just keeping the family and those experiencing it at the forefront?
Absolutely. I think the first step of providing quality legal services is understanding your client's needs. You may have the legal answer right off the bat, but that's not necessarily what your client may be wanting to hear. You would want to understand what is it that they're intending to get out of this process and cater your approach accordingly. Legal answer is more or less will not change because the circumstances or the situation may give you the same answer in several situations. What's different is the people that you're dealing with. What are their motivations and what are their intentions? And if you can give them the outcome that they are looking for, I think they would walk away much happier and content to whatever degree they can be.
And do you have any strategies in particular that you employ when it comes to handling either a particularly sensitive situation that ensures there's like empathy and care behind it?
Yeah, I think one, being a great listener is one of the biggest aspects of practicing law. Until you really heard what your client needs, what is informing their questions and their decisions, and what are they looking for, it's hard to understand that without being a good listener. And then in response, effectively communicating to them clearly with transparency, the process, what it involves, and just efficiency in general. A lot of the times legal issues can be drawn out, they take time. So our job as lawyers is not just to do that and take the steps that we need to, but minimize some of the inefficiencies that come with practicing law to the degree that we can, and communicate and set expectations in a way that clients also understand what the process will look like.
I'm hearing listening to understand instead of listening to just respond.
Yeah, of course. And clients want to also feel that they are being heard and that their needs are being met. And you may not be able to guarantee what the legal outcome is going to be, but if you can set expectations and explain to them what is involved in the process, I think they appreciate the transparency and will really value the services that you're providing to them.
Beautiful. And before we get too carried away, I also want to know you are part of the Legacy Expo. You're involved in it. You're involved in it this year. How did you first get involved with the Legacy Expo, and what do you hope to accomplish with the participation in this event?
So the Legacy Expo is something that I just stumbled upon. I know they've been around for a very long time and they've been doing this for a fair number of years now. I came across Michael just through one of the Markham Board of Trade meetings. So we try to be involved in the community, and that's one of the areas. And the social aspect of it where you get to interact with people from the community. And that's how I met him. And that's how the conversation started. And it just so happened that it was that time that he was looking for someone to provide insight into the legal field in that area of law. And it just turned out to be a great collaboration. And as part of being involved in the community, I think the Legacy Expo is a great platform. One of the challenges that you face in this area of law is just people not being aware or not knowing what they don't know and not asking the right questions. So one of the main agendas that I hope to accomplish is just spreading the word, educating people, and much like yourself, and you're doing some great work and just putting out the word about questions to think about when you're talking about death and making that conversation flow so much better and not leave it as a taboo, I think is a part of what I hope to accomplish and leave people feeling that they have the questions, maybe not the answers, but they know where to look for it from.
I'm not surprised at all that you met Michael at a community event. He is everywhere and I love it. Not surprised at all.
Yeah.
On that topic, are you able to share anything in particular when it comes to a challenging estate dispute and like what particularly made it challenging and how do you resolve and handle those types of situations? And what can people keep in mind when they're planning like their wills and their legacy and everything?
Yeah, so I mean, the first part of your question about challenging situations is every estate has its own challenges, but I think one of the most memorable ones to date was a client who was a common law partner and was dealing with an estate where the partner had done a will several years ago, pre-relationship, never ended up updating it, but they were also not legally married. So having been married for 30 plus years and looking at a will that doesn't say anything about her was an extremely sensitive situation for her emotionally, not just the financial aspect of it, but just knowing that she was in a position where she didn't know what to do. She didn't know if she was going to be able to survive financially and take care of herself for the next several years to come. So the emotional aspect of it was the biggest challenge, where she had to come to terms with the fact that the will said what it did. But then she, of course, had options to explore, and she applied as a dependent. And we entered into negotiation and settlement discussions with the other side, who, of course, acknowledged her relationship and also valued the time that she had spent with her partner. And just having that discussion and getting to a point where she just thought that, why should I have to fight? Why do I need to ask for this? And, just that inherent feeling of I'm not being taken care of was a very difficult situation to grapple for her. And for me to explain that you have options, but unfortunately, this is what the situation is. So let's focus on what we can do. And thankfully, we didn't have to litigate the matter, and we were able to come to a resolution because the other side understood that she certainly has a claim, she's a dependent. And so we were able to factor in all of that to provide her an outcome. And she's happy, and she knows that her retirement years are now provided for and she can rest easy. So, but it was certainly a challenging beginning.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I've heard situations where the other side may not be as kind in recognizing that relationship. So I'm really glad to hear that that was her situation. And what I'm also hearing is make sure that your wills are updated.
Of course. So every time you're looking at getting a will done, it's a dynamic document. It doesn't come into effect until the person has passed away. So every few years, you want to look back and say, okay, what did I do in my will? And has my personal situation changed? Have my family dynamics changed? Has my financial situation changed? Are there different people in the picture now and some who may not be in the picture anymore? So it's so important to not just do a will and then forget about it, but keep revisiting it, reviewing. Laws change all the time, where your will now may have to be updated so that it's in compliance with what the law currently says. So update your wills, review your estate plan, and make sure that it really reflects what your wishes and intentions are. If you're not sitting with your lawyer who's explaining to you what your will says, and you're just going into the signing appointment and doing all of the signings for an hour, that's likely not going to mean you know what your will says. So understanding what you're doing and getting the right advice is extremely important. And unfortunately, people do wills and they, of course, want to be cost efficient about it, and that's completely understandable. But at the same time, you're putting a lot at stake. So you want to make sure that if you're paying something for it, you may as well do it right and get the right advice to ensure that they're put in place appropriately.
And then can you explain how and if this relates to what probate is and like any guidance on how to navigate the probate process for folks?
Of course. So probate, which is now called an application for a certificate of appointment of a state trustee, is essentially the process of getting your will validated. So when a person passes away, whoever their named executor is would have to apply to court to get officially appointed as the executor. And that's when they can start to administer the estate as per the terms of the will. So just because you have a will doesn't automatically mean that probate is complete. It's a separate process where you would have to physically apply into court and then get the certificate that the court issues to deal with that estate.
Lots of steps. Lots of steps.
Absolutely. So sometimes it may be required, and there are situations where it may not be required. So the first step is just ask the question, speak to a lawyer. You may or may not need to retain them, but just getting the information about what you need to do and getting informed as an executor is important, because an executor is a fiduciary who must be aware of what their legal obligations are. So if at any time you are named an executor or are dealing with an estate, it's important to get the advice so you're doing things right.
And there's a statistic that's roughly, on average, people will have to manage 2 deaths in their lives. They'll have to be a part of it. That statistic is higher for you, as you've probably had to navigate lots of these situations for folks. How do you make sure that this process is transparent for folks who are going to be unfamiliar with it, and also just feel a little less daunting? Because there's a lot of words that aren't typically used day to day, that can leave people a little bit confused. How do you make sure that this is a transparent and less daunting process?
Yeah, so process-wise, generally speaking, I like to do what's called a discovery meeting. And that initial step is just to talk to the clients, explain to them in simple terms what the process is going to involve, communicating to them the expectations, some timelines, and of course, we're not able to give guarantees about how long the court would take to process applications. But it's important that they understand what the major steps are going to be. You don't have to bombard them with a lot of legal jargon that they may not want to necessarily be dealing with, because it's also important to know that they come to you at a very challenging time. They are likely very overwhelmed, potentially mourning the loss of a loved one. And so their mindset is not where they come in and they are ready to imbibe and get all of that information from you. So not overwhelming them, keeping the steps simple and giving them information and letting them know, let's touch base in another few weeks and I'll give you some more details. Just getting them a starting point. Checklists are great, and that's what I usually provide to them to get started on things that they want to start doing. You can give them a lot of information, which they will likely not register, and that's not going to help you. So just giving them the relevant information and letting them know to come back, chat again, and revisit some of those things, and just simplifying the process for them. As an expert, if I go to a medical professional, I don't need to know all of the science behind it, as long as they're explaining to me what the process is going to involve and what is my responsibility and what do I need to do to make that process simple. And the same way I look at it as giving them an outline, giving them a broad strokes overview, and then going into the details as we move along in the process.
Are there any resources that you can think of or that come to mind that folks can kind of check out to get a better understanding of what to prepare for, what to look out for?
There's tons of resources out there, but again, you want to be selective, and people come to us with questions they've Googled and answers they've found. But generally speaking, the government's website is a great resource to get started on executor duties. We post a lot of articles. We do a lot of blog posts and summaries and checklists on our law firm's website as well. And even if you don't know where to look, generally, if clients ask us questions like this, we will point them in the right direction. So for instance, if they're wanting to do a guardianship application, or if they're wanting to know what are the responsibilities of an executor, we would point them to resources that they need at the time, because Google is vast, and just going on the internet and putting questions out there will likely give them some very varied response. So asking the question and then looking for the resource is likely a much better approach than trying to find everything possible that you could read up on. And generally, the first step or the first meeting that we have with the client is a great point where we tell them, this is where you can go and access these resources. Here's the articles. The legislation is what guides us, but we can interpret that for you. And here are some articles to read as well.
Yeah, there's Google, there's ChatGPT, there's Gemini, and there's lots of things. Is there anything that clients should keep in mind is there anything that they should keep in mind when they're speaking to a lawyer in terms of like red flags from the lawyer's end of like, oh, wait, this doesn't like mash well with either what I'm looking for or my intentions?
Of course. I think it's important to be comfortable with the lawyer that you're going to be dealing with. So that initial meeting, and of course, we do meetings by Zoom and we do meetings by phone, but I always prefer, if the clients are agreeable and if it's possible for them to come in, an in-person meeting is really where you can get a feel of whether or not it's a good fit. Understanding that any conversation that you have with your lawyer is confidential. Even if you are not retaining that lawyer, they are bound by rules of confidentiality. If, let's say, someone from the other side was to contact them the next day, they have an obligation to not disclose any information, even the fact that you have met with them. And there is conflict of interest issues that you would want to be aware of, that lawyers will always advise you. They may not be able to tell you the details. So if someone from the other side is contacting us and we're in the process of getting retained by the other side, we would very blatantly tell them that unfortunately we cannot act for you. They don't need to know the reasons, and there's no obligation to provide them with those details. But confidentiality is huge, and that's one of the things that makes people comfortable with speaking about these personal issues. A lot of the times it deals with, of course, your family and personal issues that relate to finances as well. So you're disclosing a lot of information that's sensitive, and just understanding and having faith in the fact that we are bound by that confidentiality and we have a responsibility to maintain it is usually something that we try and communicate to our clients from the get-go, so that they're comfortable in talking to us. And just knowing that if you're not getting the right answers, or if you are questioning the advice that you are getting, you can, of course, get a second opinion, speak to different lawyers, because every legal strategy might be something that you want to discover and find out about what the options are. So the answer or the way you get to it is not going to be the same, even though the answer is. So whether that approach aligns with your style or if it's a good fit for you is something that you can only discover once you've had that initial conversation. And if you're just speaking to a clerk and you haven't gotten a chance to speak to the lawyer and they're not necessarily available to chat with you, you would want to make an attempt to establish that contact first. The staff is a great resource, and they are what run a big part of our practice. But establishing contact with the lawyer and understanding that this is the person who is going to be instructing the staff and dealing with their matter, and whether or not it's a good fit, is an important aspect.
Beautiful. Thank you for walking us through that. I appreciate it. And would you say that there are what are some of the ethical considerations that you kind of have to navigate when it comes to estate litigation, and how do you handle them when they come up?
Yeah, so estates is unfortunately full of ethical dilemmas that we face on the daily, whether it is confidentiality, whether it is interests of the parties versus your own interests. So a lot of the times clients will want to do some things which may not align with what you would want to do or what your approach would be. So it's really important to understand that when you're practicing law, we are acting for our client. We are acting in their best interests. So if there is any conflict where your personal beliefs may be different from your clients, that has to be set aside. If you cannot provide them the level of service that they need based on their beliefs and based on their interests, then it may not be a good fit. And generally speaking, you want to establish that trust where clients are honest with you. A lot of times clients will perhaps disclose 10% of the information to you and you're relying on it and you don't know the 90%, which usually comes out eventually, but it takes time. So one of the biggest ethical dilemmas you face is when clients have given you part of the information and you're dealing with that, and now you have the actual full picture. How do you navigate and how do you correct that situation? So it will happen, and it happens more often than we'd like it to, but it's important to establish that trust from the beginning to let the client know that we are working for you, we are working in your interests. And if you give us the full picture, whether it's the good or the bad or the worst, we should know what we're dealing with, and we wouldn't be able to help you or assist you and address perhaps the weaknesses of your matter if we don't know them.
Are there any common misconceptions that come up that people have around estate planning and probate that you have to kind of navigate them away or explain? People always laugh when I'm like, what are the common misconceptions? And I can always tell when they're like, there's a lot.
Yeah. Let me bring that list out. But I mean, we do a segment on our social media where we do myths. That's all we would post about questions that we get from clients because they have a belief about something specific and it's an absolute misconception. So one of the biggest ones that we get is, I don't need to do a will because I don't have any assets. I'm not rich. And so it's important to understand that a will doesn't just provide for protecting your assets or ensuring that it goes to the person that you want to leave it to. But if you're dealing with a complex family structure, if you're dealing with minors where you need to appoint a guardian, there are several things that a will provide for, in the absence of which you're leaving it in the hands of people that you may not want or people you may not trust. So one of the other ones that we get is, I've done my will, so my estate planning is complete. Well, I think we touched on this before, but it's a dynamic document. You are going to need to update your will every time your personal situation changes, and it's not a valid document until the person has passed away. I can do and change my will any number of times as long as I have capacity. And you want to ensure that it reflects your most updated and recent intentions. And it truly reflects what you would want to do, or what you would want your estate to be dispersed to after you've passed away. So it's not a one-time task. It's something that will change over time, and you want to keep reviewing it and keep updating it with time.
That one that you mentioned, like, I'm not rich, I don't need to do a will, I've heard that multiple times, and I've heard stories of how that type of thinking has played out for families, and it turns into a very challenging situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And often when people come to us, they've either been through a situation like that, and so they've realized, and so it's a retroactive response where they want to get a will done because they've dealt with someone who hasn't done a will. And it's a good starting point, but I would hope that with spreading the word and just educating people about things like this, we would have to deal with less and less of a situation like that, where people are aware and they just understand. And it's just a matter of spreading that knowledge and making them aware of it.
And when it comes to your personal goals in this space, what would you say your personal future goals are?
I think it's constantly a learning curve where I don't think I would ever know everything there is to know in this area of law. And law is dynamic in the sense that it doesn't just change, but it also is informed by our culture and the times that we live in. And so my hope and my aim is to constantly be learning and to be hopefully getting the expertise in the area of law, but also updating it and staying up to date with what's going on in the times, and at the same time spreading that knowledge, sharing that knowledge, and collaborating with wonderful people like yourself so we can help and make this conversation a much more palatable one.
I promise I did not make her say that, guys. And my final question for you is, how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. But I think the theme that sticks with me, and I know will stick with me, is just being an educator. I think law as an area of practice is not just providing services, but it's providing knowledge. We have a lot of power. We have a lot of information that is only a lot of the times understandable to us, and words that don't mean anything to other people or just jargon and are complicated mean a lot to us in the field. And so I want to be known as a lawyer or a professional who just helps demystifying that legal process and just providing my clients with the knowledge that they need, and empowering them to ask the right questions, get the right advice. And as long as I'm spreading that knowledge and information, I think I would be happy and not haunt anyone.
Did you say not haunt anyone?
Not haunt anyone after I'm dead.
Beautiful. I'm very glad to hear that. Apeksha, thank you so much for your time with me today. Is there anything else you'd like to share, and let us know how we can stay in contact with you?
No, absolutely. It was wonderful. And I'm so happy that you're doing this. And I'm available to answer questions. I work at Sorbara Law, so you can find me online. We have a very prominent social media presence. So as much as I am camera shy and don't like doing videos and things like that, we're out there. We're in Markham and we're very involved, and our offices are in Waterloo, Guelph, and Fergus. So we have a pretty widespread reach, but we're hoping to reach as many people as we can. And I'm so glad that we were able to do this collaboration.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Apeksha. Her expertise in wills and estates law, combined with her dedication for clear communication with clients and families, really provides invaluable insights into how we can better prepare for life's inevitable transitions. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to resources we mentioned in today's episode, including more information on upcoming events and activities regarding the Legacy Expo. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star rating and follow us online. You can find us at Philotimolife. That's PHILOTIMOLIFE. Thanks for listening, and until next time.